So what if I told you there are TV shows so catastrophically bad that networks didn't just cancel them after a full season or even after a few episodes, but literally pulled the plug after airing one single episode? Some were so offensive that sponsors refused to be associated, so networks had no choice but to pull them from the schedule. And some of these shows were so bad they were pulled while they were live on air, while others were so shameful that hosts used their next time on air to do nothing but apologize. Welcome to the graveyard of television's biggest disasters, shows that were so bad they were canceled after one single episode or less. First up, Turn On from 1969. This was supposed to be ABC's answer to the massive success of Laugh-In on NBC. The show was created by some of the same producers behind Laugh-In and was positioned as an even more experimental, cutting-edge comedy variety show. I mean, you could see why they would have thought this could work. Laugh-In was dominating the ratings with its rapid-fire sketches and counterculture humor. The show featured an ensemble cast, delivering joke after joke with rapid-fire pacing, psychedelic visuals, and celebrity cameos that made it must-watch TV. It launched careers, created catchphrases that entered mainstream culture, and attracted massive audiences who had never seen anything quite like its blend of political satire and absurdist humor. So other networks were desperate to replicate its formula because it proved there was a huge appetite for experimental, boundary-pushing comedy that spoke to younger audiences. And this is what led to the creation of Turn On, a new TV show similar to Laugh-In, but one that promised to push boundaries even further with computer-generated graphics and more provocative content. Well, that was the show's description in theory. Here's what actually happened. The show premiered on February 5th, 1969, but the content was just so confusing, tasteless, and incomprehensible. Critics called it a mess of sexual innuendos and drug references that felt more like a fever dream than a comedy show. So its bizarre and offensive nature led to multiple ABC affiliates actually pull it from live broadcast during commercial breaks. WEWS Cleveland famously refused to return to the show after the first commercial break, deciding to run a public service announcement instead. By the end of the week, ABC had canceled Turn On after just one single episode. The real tragedy? The show was so ahead of its time with computer graphics and rapid-fire editing. In fact, it was promoted as the first ever computerized TV show. And the humor might have worked a decade or two later. But instead, it became one of television's most notorious disasters and one of the fastest shows to ever get pulled from air. Next, we have Lawless from 1997. This was Fox's attempt to create an action series starring former NFL linebacker Brian Bosworth, who had previously tried to transition into action movies with limited success. The show was positioned as a gritty crime drama about a tough investigator who played by his own rules. Fox promoted it heavily, banking on Bosworth's name recognition from his football career and his previous action movie roles. But the premiere episode was a complete disaster. The ratings were so poor that Fox immediately pulled the show from the schedule. Even though 6 episodes had already been filmed, Fox didn't even bother trying to air the remaining episodes at a less popular hour of the day. They just pretended the whole thing never happened. Now, here's the strange part. The TV show currently has a 7.6% IMDb rating, which is incredible given only one episode ever aired in the United States. This means that it perhaps eventually found its audience, and maybe Fox should reconsider broadcasting the remaining episodes, even if it's just online. What's also weird is that the 7.6 out of 10 rating for Lawless is also the highest rating for any Brian Bosworth project that I could find. So yeah, maybe Fox was too quick to pull this one from air. Now, there are some shows that are so bad, it was immediately followed by a public apology. In 1961, Jackie Gleason hosted a game show called You're in the Picture. At the time, Jackie Gleason was at the peak of his fame thanks to The Honeymooners. So CBS gave him a primetime slot and a big budget for what was essentially a panel game, where celebrities stuck their heads through holes in large canvas paintings and had to guess what picture they were in. Some of the paintings were highly offensive, to put it mildly. Gleason himself seemed lost and uncomfortable throughout the entire broadcast. But here's what makes this story so legendary. The following week, instead of airing the second episode, Gleason spent the entire 30-minute time slot smoking cigarettes and apologizing to viewers for how terrible the previous week's show had been. He called it the worst thing he'd ever been associated with and took full responsibility for the disaster. It was one of the most iconic moments in television history. A major star using the entirety of his time slot to publicly apologize for how bad his show was. It's honestly one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen, especially when you realize his whole apology wasn't even scripted. Yet he was able to speak from the heart and still keep it entertaining. The irony is that his apology showed how genuinely talented Gleason was and made people love him even more. It's also why the show's cancellation after one episode did not affect his career one single bit. Serious question. What happens when you give a rock star $2 million and tell him he's the next Don Johnson from Miami Vice? The answer? South of Sunset, from 1993. This was CBS's attempt to turn Eagles musician Glenn Frey into a television star. The show was a detective drama set in Los Angeles, with Frey playing a private investigator who solved crimes while looking cool. CBS invested a lot of money into the production, spending a reported $2 million per episode, making it one of the most expensive shows at the time. But you know what? In principle, this seemed like a good idea. Frey had name recognition from his music career, and the show was designed as a stylish crime drama in the vein of Miami Vice. And people loved Miami Vice at the time. But it seemed like the show was cursed from the very start. Its October 27, 1993 premiere faced immediate problems when breaking news coverage of the Malibu wildfires interrupted the broadcast across much of the West Coast. So a big chunk of the intended audience didn't even get to see it. But that's not the reason why it was pulled. You know why? Because those who did watch gave it very, 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 very bad reviews. And the viewing figures were terrible, even when the wildfire interruption was accounted for. So CBS decided to pull the show immediately after the first episode's terrible performance. This is despite having already produced 7 very expensive multi-million-dollar episodes. Now, okay, so those additional episodes did eventually find a home on VH1 in 1994, but they aired to a much smaller cable audience, and it wasn't enough to recover even a fraction of the original production budget. Now, this next show managed to disappoint and lose an audience that was literally already watching TV. I mean, this show was handed millions of viewers on a platter and still managed to lose them all in seconds. I'm talking about Emily's Reasons Why Not, from 2006, which was supposed to be Heather Graham's triumphant return to television. Graham was coming off several successful movies, and ABC gave her a mid-season sitcom about a successful book editor navigating dating and career challenges. The network positioned the show as a smart, sophisticated comedy for modern women, investing a reported $5 million on just the pilot. Graham was both the star and executive producer, giving her significant creative control over the project. ABC scheduled the premiere for January 9th, 2006. And do you know why they picked this date? Well, this was so they could premiere it directly after their hit show, The Bachelor. So the huge audience from that show would roll into the comedy's first episode. But it didn't help, and the premiere episode was a complete disaster. The show only attracted 6.2 million viewers, which sounds like a lot until you realize this number means it basically lost 40% of The Bachelor's audience right off the bat. And you already know more people dropped off by the first commercial, and even more would have left before the show was over. So ABC were like, nope, nah, and canceled the show immediately after the first episode, making it one of the fastest cancellations in network television history. The decision was so swift that it shocked even industry insiders, who were used to shows getting at least a few episodes to find their footing. 6 episodes had actually been filmed, but the remaining 5 episodes never aired in the United States. And then there's my honorable mention, The Hasselhoffs from 2010. This is an honorable mention because unlike the others on this list, this reality show actually managed to air 2 episodes before A&E pulled the plug. But it deserves mention because it was such a spectacular failure that it barely lasted longer than any of the other true one-episode disasters that we've already looked at. The show followed David Hasselhoff and his 2 daughters as they tried to launch show business careers while dealing with family drama. This was during Hasselhoff's post-Baywatch, post-Knight Rider phase, when he was trying to reinvent himself as a reality TV star. A&E promoted the show as a behind-the-scenes look at a famous family trying to make it in Hollywood. But the premiere episodes were painfully awkward, with forced family interactions and manufactured drama that felt completely artificial. The ratings were so terrible that A&E canceled the show after just 2 episodes, making it one of the shortest-lived reality shows in cable television history. The sad part was that Hasselhoff's daughters seemed genuinely talented, but this disaster probably hurt their chances of becoming celebrities in their own right, much more than it helped them.